topic that can be daunting at times, right? I know probably the most foster experienced person in our church is actually Ray. How many kids have you fostered? Yeah. And so if you have any thoughts at the end, feel free to jump in and let us know if you have any thoughts as well. I didn't know if you were going to be here tonight. But we are going to begin with a topic that is often daunting, and I think a lot of people, when you talk about the foster system, at least from my interaction with people, all they think is scary, difficult, kind of broken, and needing to be pieced back together is kind of the image people have of the foster world. And so our hope tonight is to give you a dose of both reality, but also the worthiness of the mission of being involved, whether it be directly or indirectly, supporting those who are fostering kids. Give you a picture of what that looks like, and then answering any questions that anybody has here or for those online. I'm only going to be watching questions from the Facebook feed, and so if you would like to ask a question, you need to do it on the Facebook feed, not on YouTube or the main website. All right, so here's how this is going to work. We're going to start with a little bit of discussion. This is our panel. I'll have them introduce themselves in a moment. We are going to start with a discussion on the foster care system, and then after about probably 40 minutes, we will shift into a time of discussion with the audience or with those who are watching online. So to begin, who wants to start? I know. Do you want to start, or does Stacy want to start? Someone on the end. All right, Stacy. Tell us, your name, what your involvement is in this whole topic of foster care, the foster system. Just introduce yourself, and then we'll come down the line here.
Hi, my name is Stacy Macaluso. I currently work with DHS in Pueblo County. I'm a lead worker in our family engagement unit. I've been there a little over 10 years, and before that, I worked for Kids Crossing, licensing foster homes.
I'm Morgan Marino. I'm a supervisor at Pueblo County DHS. I've been there going on 7 years, and I work with our adolescent unit as well as our baby unit.
I'm Jalissa Koblenz. I'm a caseworker with the New Horizons Child Placement Agency, and I have been there going on 9 months.
And I'm Krista Burkholder. I am also with New Horizons Child Placement Agency. I have been there 7 years, and prior to that, I worked in child welfare in Pennsylvania. And New Horizons specifically works with the counties as far as placements go, like providing homes and foster homes for placements there. But then we also do foster care. It's kind of a unique little niche thing that we do, foster care for women who are incarcerated at Denver Women's Correctional Facility, provide them an option for caring for their children.
I'm Kayla Freiberg. I am in foster care. We're a foster family. We've been certified for 3 years, and we're newbies. We've had 2 babies.
All right. So the first question would be just broadly, we all awake now? Yes? All right, the first question, was that me, Chad? Really? You're not supposed to say that. You're not supposed to say it's me. The first question, why are you involved in the foster system? What does it matter to you personally? What does that look like for you? So let's start with Krista.
So when Quinn asked this question, I thought you might not like my answer, because when I was in college for social work, I said, I will do anything but child welfare. I didn't want to do anything with foster care. But when it came time looking for a job, those were the doors that were open, and I can look back and see how God has divinely orchestrated that. And I have been in it now for going on 13 years, and so And I'm not going anywhere anytime soon because I do love it. And I think the thing that it matters to me and is meaningful is because seeing how God puts families together, whether it's for a season or whether it's for permanency, just seeing how God orchestrates that and cares for each child, and also then caring for the families as they care for those children. So I see it much more of a ministry than a job.
Okay, good. Does anyone else want to jump in, or should I call a name? Huh? All right, Kayla, if you give a side of like the family as opposed to the workers.
Why am I in foster care?
Yeah.
I would say I'm in foster care because before we got married, we decided we were going to adopt babies eventually, and that's how God made it happen. I probably wouldn't still be in foster care if it wasn't for our New Horizons agency, because they're just that good. It's because of God. But it's a blessing to provide home for a child who needs one, and they're a blessing to us more than I think we're a blessing to them. And it's really a good picture of God's love toward us, and his adoption of us, because, I mean, that's what he does. He adopts us.
Okay. Let's get one more. One of you two down at the end.
My answer is kind of similar. I got into this line of work because I love working with children, specifically littler ones. I also said I would never be a caseworker, but God opened doors, and I've been here for 10 years, and he's definitely pushed me outside of my comfort zone, but in a good way, and I've grown, and it's been a good opportunity for myself as well as working with the children and their families.
Okay. So for someone who is considering one day being a foster family, what does that process look like? Obviously, it takes some work to become a foster family, but I think people can be confused exactly what that would entail if they want to go down that road. Who wants to start off as what it looks like? Morgan, do you want to start?
Sure.
Go for it.
So there's a couple different options or a couple different ways. You can go through Pueblo County directly, or you can go through a child placement agency like New Horizons. Essentially what it entails is doing a home study and background checks, and there's a whole slew of other things that are, it's a pretty intense process. It's pretty invasive as well. So just going through that is probably one of the hardest things, but kind of like what I had said before, you can either go strictly through the county or through a child placement agency.
What's the timeline typically?
I don't know if I have specific times. I know the county has kind of fast-tracked some licensing just because of the need of the child and the need for placements, period. I don't have, do you have a?
Like a couple months, or?
Yeah, 3 to 6 months maybe? 3 to 4?
Usually 3
Okay,
to
cool.
4 months, yeah.
Okay.
If there's not a specific need for a specific child and you're just going through the process, it can take up to 120 days. But yeah, it can be done faster than that.
All right. So you said it's an invasive situation, the home study, the interviewing of the potential family. So let's go with Kayla. So we've been through that process. What were your thoughts on the nature of the home study?
I would say for us it wasn't terrible because of who our social workers were and are. They really made it more friendship, not necessarily like drilling you and making sure you're right for the job kind of a thing. I would say it might be harder if you have, I don't know how to say it, more of a background. Like, we've been married to each other and that's all. But they might ask you if you've had other
They
marriages.
will ask you.
Yeah, they will ask you about those types of things, and it does get very personal, and they'll ask you all sorts of intimate questions about your livelihood, your life, your relationship with each other, your family background, your siblings, your parents, just basically everything, because they want to make sure that that's a safe place for that child, and that they're not putting that child into another harmful environment. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't try because you've had more than one marriage or because a distant cousin has a substance abuse problem. That's definitely not a reason not to try.
Yeah, what would you say is the percent of people who start the process and actually finish the process and get licensed as a foster family? Do you have any frame of reference for?
I feel like everyone that, I don't know, probably because I just feel like I only see what comes through. I don't see the background on this is how many applicants we're receiving and this is how many gets pushed through.
Okay. Do you have any? Yeah.
So I would say one of the things about becoming a foster family is, while it's not necessarily hard, there's difficult pieces to it. It's a commitment. I look at it as a commitment, as it's like you're stepping into something that you're committing to. And I think for the majority, that my experience has been with certifying through New Horizons, like certifying families. A lot of times when we have a family that shows interest, we give them pretty much of the bare facts of what it's going to be like. We don't, sugarcoat it, because we're not just trying to lure you into something and then have you be like, this is not what I signed up for. So just sort of giving you the bare facts. And I think also I tell my foster families, I believe that, I personally can't imagine doing foster care without, the grace of God actively flowing through my life. I cannot imagine doing that. And I think as believers, that when we get to step into these places, you are not in it alone. God is with you, and He gives you wisdom and grace in so many places that you couldn't imagine before you step into those places. So I say if there's any sense of this is something we should do, just go for it. Just go for it.
Good. So giving reality, you said, we'll move on to this. What are some of the major obstacles families face when fostering? And Julissa, if you want to start us off.
Sure, I can start us off, and then you all can add to it. There can be numerous obstacles. One could be interacting with birth parents. That can be challenging sometimes, and especially if you've come to love the child in your home. And also when decisions get made that are out of your control, that don't look like they're in the best interest of the child, trusting God with that, that can be really hard. And just all of the rules, the kind of the extra rules that you have to follow as a foster parent, things that, you have to get a doctor's permission to give medication, things that you wouldn't have to do with children that are born into your home. There's a lot more than that, but
Okay.
you guys can.
Does anybody want to add? Just in the light of transparency, just what are the difficulties, Morgan?
I think just from the DHS side is just the court system. It's very complicated and confusing as it is. And so when you have a child in your home and you're already loving that child and those emotional ties are getting stronger and stronger, it's hard to listen to what's happening in the courtroom. You may not understand what's going on in general, let alone decisions, kind of like what you were saying, decisions are being made that are out of your control, sometimes out of the control of the county, or it's against what the department is even recommending. So that's probably one of the biggest things that we see being kind of a complicating factor. I think another thing too is just all of the professionals that are involved. I think that's either a really good thing or a really bad thing. It's good at times, but there definitely are times where it's too many cooks in the kitchen. There's too many people trying to make decisions for the child or children in your home. But at the same time, you have a huge support system. So you usually have a caseworker, you'll have a supervisor overseeing them, you'll have a home coordinator either through us or through a child placement agency. The youth, depending on the age, will either have a guardian ad litem or a counsel for youth. You'll also have a CASA volunteer, you'll have parents' attorneys, you'll have a county attorney, and you'll have a judge, and then you'll have any interveners, any special respondents. So there's lots of people that are going to be involved in this one case with these kiddos or a child being placed in your home. So it gets a little complicated. So.
And to add to that, like also being okay with like having some of those people in your home on like a regular basis.
Yes.
And sometimes on a surprise basis.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
All right, does anyone else want to add to that? Major obstacles? No? All right. So individually, how can followers of Christ best support the foster care system without, just right now, without saying, be a foster family? What are other ways to start that someone could support the foster care scenario in our community?
I think just being aware of people in your church community or even here in the Pueblo community that they're fostering kids or they have a family member who's a foster kid, I don't know, but just showing support to them. It's a kind of like what I was saying, it's a really difficult process. And so just showing your support to them, giving them donations of clothes, cooking them dinner one time a week, or taking, of course it has to be approved, but like taking the kiddo to the mall or to the movies or just giving them a break. I think just showing that support is huge. A lot of times foster families feel that, I don't know if you would consider it support, but the only supportive people are the ones that are like the caseworker or the kiddo's therapist. But it really does take a village to have a foster kiddo in your home. And it makes it really difficult when the foster family feels like they're alone and they're not being heard, and then the courts are not in favor of them, and it just gets messy, for lack of a better term. But just coming together as a church community or just a community in general is huge.
Okay. Does anyone want to add to that?
Pray for them. I mean, just be willing to say, like, I'm praying for you, and then do it. And, like, even just letting them know that you're praying for them. And then also understanding vicarious trauma. So a lot of times when kiddos are in the home, they come with their own trauma stories. And as a foster parent, they get involved in that story. They're there to support the kiddos. So we see foster families affected by that, which is vicarious trauma. So understand that when a foster family is actively fostering, they are going through a form of trauma themselves. And so just support them. You don't have to understand it. There's going to be things that they can't tell you, but just be there, let them not be okay sometimes, and just love them. Like she said, take them dinner, or even just drop off, a bag of groceries. Just ways to lighten the load through the midst of it all so that they know that we're not in this alone.
Okay.
Another thing too that Pueblo County DHS just rolled out is I'm sure if you all went to service this weekend, saw the pamphlet in the bulletin about Care Portal. So essentially what it is Pueblo County is really trying to get faith-based communities to really support these foster kids, these families that are involved in the system, trying to just do a little bit of outreach. Family Worship Center along, I think there's like 7 or 8 other churches in the community are involved in Care Portal. So essentially what it is there's a service through the department that comes through via email. If you're on a response team, you'll get that email right away, and if you're able to help out, great. If not, there's no obligation. But typically the request that'll come through is clothes or like bedding, or a family member needs help with an electricity bill, and it could go all the way up to someone needs a respite, which essentially is just short-term placement, like an overnight stay for one of their foster kiddos. So it's just really having these faith-based communities just kind of surround these families that are involved with DHS.
So what would someone do? So let's say Chris wants to do Care Portal. What's that process?
So I believe it's just careportal.com, but essentially what you can do is you can sign up just as an individual, or you can sign up under your
So the church umbrellas.
Yes,
Okay.
there are. So it's I don't know if they're, I mean, right now they're all churches. It doesn't have to be churches that are involved with Care Portal, but Family Worship Center is involved with Care Portal. So what you do is go to the website, and if you got one of these pamphlets during service, you just scan that QR code on your phone, and you just type your name in and your email, your phone number, and then you'll automatically be inputted into the system, and you'll start receiving requests from DHS caseworkers here in Pueblo County about needs that the community has, or the families that are involved with DHS.
And those needs go out to everybody on Care Portal in Pueblo County.
That's correct.
And it's just whoever can get to it first claims they're going to get to it.
Yep.
Okay.
Stacy Macaluso and I are heading that here at Family Worship Center, and we're also on the other side of it at work too. So if there's any questions on Care Portal, you guys can ask us, and I think our numbers are in the bulletin as well.
Okay. All right. Any other comments how Christians can support foster families? All right, if not, we'll go on to the next thing. Why should Christians, why should followers of Christ, the church, why should we step up to the plate on this topic?
I can start on this.
Okay.
I think when we look at how Jesus lived his life, he interacted and related with people in the margins and the most vulnerable. And yeah, these children are very vulnerable, and so if we're going to follow Jesus, we should do what he did. And and I think, like Kayla said earlier, like God adopted us, and so this, I think it's very close to the heart of God, this work.
Good. You want to add?
And I think this in some cases could be the only time a child hears about God or has that love, and so just planting that seed.
Okay. So how many of you would say this is more of a ministry for you than a job? Okay. Any other comments on why should Christians, why should the church step up?
I think also we've only ever taken in babies, but the ministry does not just stop at the child. If you're a foster parent, the ministry extends as much as it can to the parents that are involved, even social workers, anyone involved in the case. If you are a foster parent, or social workers too, the ministry extends to the parents especially. They might only have the opportunity to hear about Christ if you share it with them.
Okay. Good. You hear about extremely difficult children to foster. You ever had any of those? Yes? Many, many times. Is that a popular problem?
Yes.
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 Describe what that looks like, that need. When we hear about children that are very difficult, we'll just leave it there. I mean, in my mind, I instantly go to either teens who are out of control and are threatening to kill the person who are fostering them, and I know people who have had that happen to them, or drug babies or something along those lines where it's just a very difficult time caring for that child. So is that accurate?
Yeah, so right now in Pueblo County, obviously drugs are huge in this community, unfortunately. So our adolescents, and there's some as young as 8 or 9 years old, I've heard around the office, are really struggling with addiction, and fentanyl is getting more prevalent in this community too. Unfortunately, we don't have any inpatient like juvenile facilities that they can go to. There is a detox facility in Trinidad, but it's just a short-term program. So we're seeing a lot of kiddos coming into care, withdrawing, stuff like that. We're also seeing the out-of-control youths as well, so a lot of them that are picking up delinquency charges. Some of them are blowing out of their adoptive homes, so they were adopted as a young child, and then now they're displaying those out-of-control behaviors. Others are just out of control youth from biological parents, but our adolescent community in Pueblo is definitely struggling the most right now that we're seeing. Of course, with the drugs being prevalent, there is a high demand of foster homes for our drug-induced or drug-born babies. Those are, I feel like it comes in waves. Right now, we're kind of on the increase a little bit. It kind of, hopefully it'll plateau out a little bit, but usually in the summer it spikes just slightly. But our adolescent community right now is just really struggling.
Okay. In Pueblo, I don't know if you know this number, but just roughly, right now, how desperate are we for foster families? What does that scenario look like? Do you have like an idea of how many kids need homes or in just temporary places but wouldn't be permanent? Any picture you can paint of Pueblo?
We are in desperate need of foster homes. We have 2 adolescents that are essentially homeless. They're in our care and custody. They do not have placement, and so they are residing at the office with 2 staff members. There's kind of a rotating schedule going on. So we are in extreme desperate need for foster parents to help with these are tough kids. It's not, they're tough, I'll just say that, so not to scare anyone, but.
Well, so let's talk, if anybody wants to chime in. What type of a person do you need to be to really walk into that situation for adolescents? What type of a person, what type of a home? Do you have any advice? I know, and whether it's right or wrong, we've had a rule of we're not going to take a teenager when we have 5 other kids that are young in the house. Are there any advice you'd give someone, the type of person you would look for in that case?
So these youth thrive off of structure. So any home environment where there's structure and they know what to expect. There's be careful with my words. It really needs to be structured. These kids are coming from an environment where sometimes they were able to just kind of do whatever they want. Also, some of these kiddos have severe mental health issues, so that structure really helps with maintaining and managing behaviors for them. Someone that is assertive and can really implement some structure is really going to help these kids thrive, whether they're there in your home for just 24 hours or if you keep them for a couple months. That is what I think is the biggest thing that these kids need. They will manipulate, they will take advantage, they'll do what they need to do, they'll push boundaries, I see you nodding, so you I'm sure have been there, so they'll do whatever they need to do to get their way and make the environment, the type of environment that they want to be in, which usually is not very good. So.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in on advice for types of people or what you need to be ready to deal with, family structures, and what to consider?
So definitely agree with everything Morgan said, and we at New Horizons don't have a demographic that's willing, or foster families that are willing to work with teens at this point, but I did with my previous jobs, and they were some of my favorite ones on my caseload, even though they drove me crazy. I loved them dearly, and I think one of the things that teens especially are just crying out for is someone who is going to not put up with the junk they throw at you, but love them consistently. Because there's usually a lot of stuff that has happened in their life, and that's why they're acting the way they are. And so that structure that Morgan was talking about is like laced with love, and probably tough love, if I'm completely honest. But I want to say, is it Josh Shipp? Is it? I don't know if I have the name right. I know he was talks about I don't know if I had my phone with me, I'd look it up, but I didn't bring my phone up with me. He talked about how he was in so many foster homes, bounced through foster homes, and it was one of his last foster homes that like they really truly saw him and loved him for who he was, and how it just turned his life around. And for some of these kids, like it's just that one person that doesn't give up on them, even though you'll want to, but you don't give up even regardless of the manipulation, the triangulation, the running, all the stuff they throw at you. You don't give up on them, and sometimes that's literally what it takes to turn their lives around.
And that is the correct name. I did look it up.
Josh Ship.
Yeah, Josh Ship. So on the flip side, you hear the horror stories, trying to balance it out a little bit. I assume, or at least I would hope, that you all have seen success stories as well. And I feel like typically we don't hear that side of things. We tend to just hear all the problems associated with foster care. Is there, or are there any success stories that any of you would be willing to share? Obviously, you can't always give tremendous amounts of details and names, but are there any success stories? No?
Okay, well, she,
Yeah. In a few minutes, I'll let him.
she
talk
mentioned Josh Ship, and Tori Peterson is another author that she came from. She was a troubled youth in the foster system with many homes, and she's now at a great place in her walk with the Lord, and she has a family of her own, and she speaks out on behalf of those troubled foster kids. I think there are plenty and it's usually the last foster home, obviously, and it's God, because God does more than we can do on our own, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to be pretty general with my answer to this, but I think every case that I have worked when I was a caseworker was a success story, whether that means the kiddo was adopted or returned home or to another family member. I think just looking at this whole field, social work and working in child welfare, it all just appears pretty just dark and gloomy and honestly like just evil at times. There's been a lot of just really tough situations, but I think just looking at the positive aspects and just knowing that you did everything you could to reunify these kids or a kiddo with their parents, whether it was successful or not, is the success story that makes me keep coming back.
Okay. Does anybody else want to jump in? All right. Do you have any ideas? What's something or some things, and we talked about it a little earlier, that churches can do to help with this kind of problem at large? What do you think is necessary? I mean, I'd like to think, can you ballpark how many kids are in foster care in Pueblo County?
Oh gosh,
Just like big ballpark.
I don't even know.
Okay. Hundreds?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Thousands?
I don't think
No.
So
thousands.
probably hundreds of
Yeah.
kids. Okay. And you just look at, I mean, even what we would qualify as churches we really agree with, and, you know, we're preaching the gospel, and you look at just kind of evangelical churches, you would think that between the churches we have plenty of resources to make a significant dent in what's going on. And there's a balloon falling from the roof, so I got really distracted for a moment trying to figure out what was happening. And I guess in many cases, a lot of foster families probably are Christian. At least I know statistically, a lot of them tend to be Christians. But do you have any ideas? Do any of you have ideas? Something or things the church could do to really make a dent in this?
I would say number one is to get out of your comfort zone, because America likes to be comfortable. We like to have our 2-3 children. We like to have our job. We like to retire from our job and live off our retirement, enjoy our 3 kids and their grandkids, and yada, yada, yada. But God has not called us to just live comfortably. That does not mean everyone has to be a foster family. God has not equipped everyone to be a foster family, and that's okay. But God has given you the ability to babysit for a day, or to make food, or to pray for someone. There are so many different ways that you can make an impact. And I think so many people think I have to jump in with both feet, become a foster parent for my entire life, or I'm going to do nothing. And that's just not the case. You can choose to foster one child and be done. You can choose to get certified for foster care and say no to 5 children before God says, yes, this is the one you're going to make an impact with. There are many different avenues, and not everyone is called to take in babies. Not everyone is called to take in teenagers. Not everyone is called to take in anybody. But you just have to kind of decide for yourself what you can be uncomfortable with without going outside of your capabilities that God has given you.
And like to kind of go with that, like not letting safety and security become an idol, and not letting fear hold you back.
Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in?
I would probably add, as far as like the church at large, like the Big C church, is just getting involved in the community. So when I hear about like community involvement, like getting out of your comfort zone when you're getting involved in the community, even if it's on a like larger group level, or if it's like just being a neighbor, like honestly helping out the people that are next door, the young family that's maybe struggling next door, like things like that make a difference. Because I think sometimes if the church was really all that we're called to be, and this is not, I don't attend here, so I can say this here, right? But if the church was really what we were called to be, like we could almost eradicate, like even the need for foster care, because there would be a stepping in before it got to that place, and that would put me out of a job. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I see that as a place where like the church could step up, and even in the place of providing support and providing like therapy and just rallying around those in our community that aren't within our church walls, that truly need us to love them and care for them right where they're at. It could potentially change the landscape of foster care. And that's a conviction even for myself when I say that, because I'm thinking, what am I doing? Yes, this is my job, but what am I doing beyond that? So this is preaching to myself as well.
Morgan, do you know on or Stacy on Care Portal? It just started in Pueblo County, or it's?
Yeah, it just rolled out April 24th, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we don't quite know what the day-by-day or week-by-week request demand is.
We've been getting daily requests, at least one daily request. It's been no less than that. Sometimes it's been up to 3 or 4 a day.
Okay.
So there's a high demand already.
Is there a way to tell which people have signed up under your umbrella, or
Yes.
whatever that would be?
Yes, so Stacy and I receive emails to anyone that signs up under Family Worship Center. So we're trying to brainstorm on how to move forward from here. So I'm just going to think out loud. But essentially what I would like to do is reach out to everyone individually, say, hey, thanks for signing up for Care Portal. I would like to do a little small meeting training on how to work the system, work the app, how to respond to requests, all that good stuff, who you would be interacting with on the other side. So if you do fulfill a need, who you would contact or what that would look like, and just kind of have everyone come together hopefully within the next couple of weeks.
I'm just thinking 3, even if it was 5 a day, I feel like that's something where, it's good there are many churches. I'm just thinking, man, how is this that hard? There's 1,800 people here. Why can't we just knock this out? Multiple churches could seemingly just take care of all the requests. It's good that it's spread out, but it seems like that should be a simple thing for the church to step into and make it easy for families to put needs out there and get them met that day. So we can get an idea for how many people are active on there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, yeah.
All right. So what we're going to do now, I have some additional questions. So let me get an idea. Chad, if I can have any of the mobiles, before I go to the questions on here, does anyone in the room have a specific question you want to ask? And for a moment, I'm going to let Dale talk. If you want to talk for 2 or 3 minutes and give any thoughts, I think not many people have fostered over 100 kids. That's not a popular thing. Raise your hand for Chad. Yeah. I mean, do you have any thoughts on this? Why'd you stay in it? Why so long?
I felt I was called to do it. I became a foster parent when I was in my late 20s. I was single.
Okay.
And all I took was high-risk teenage boys. I had worked at the state hospital in the child and adolescent treatment unit, and I just fell in love with the kids. And I just took on all comers. I never turned anybody down. Wow. And nobody in their right mind should do that. So I was the perfect guy for the job. And yeah, it was. I could write a book on it. Then there was the time. Yeah. And then probably 4 or 5 years into it, one of my boys wanted to date a foster girl, and he said, "But the foster mom won't let me date her." And I said, "Well, it sounds like a pretty smart woman. I know you, kid." He says, "No, the foster mom's real good looking, and they're going over to the pizza place tonight." So I thought, well, maybe the boy's onto something. So I went over there and I met my wife.
Oh.
And, so a year later we were married, and then we just took, we had to live in 2 separate homes for a little over a year because boys and girls ain't a good thing to mix together, of course. Not teenagers anyway.
Not teenagers, yeah.
And yeah, so then we finally got together, and we just took teenage girls for a long time.
Okay.
And it was a challenge, and then probably many years into that, I had talked to them about the Kids Crossing I was affiliated with. They told me they had a 5-year-old boy that was, he had been, it was tough. Mm-hmm. But anyway, he had been removed from like 5 homes in 6 months, and he was an extremely angry kid. And me being me said, I want to meet him. And a couple weeks later, we picked him up in the emergency room, and he had blown out of another home because he was attacking people. And call us crazy, but we fell in love with him. And a couple years later, we adopted him. Uh-huh. And today he's married, and he has 3 kids. Hey. And a bun in the oven. His wife is, I think, 6 or 7 months pregnant now and doing really well. Wow. Against all odds.
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, he was a 10. Just flat out. But with God, all things are possible.
Right.
And we still have battle scars over it, but you know what? God's in the healing business.
That's right.
Yep.
So very difficult, but worth it.
Yeah, we'd be called to do. I look at it as with big problems come big opportunities to make a difference. God didn't call us to do simple things. Yeah. I'm a glutton for punishment sometimes. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I just through it all.
Lots of support.
Yeah, we had lots of support. I mean, just a quick brief summary is my grandfather ran away from an orphanage in Nebraska, and some people had brought some canned green beans into the orphanage, and some of them had botulism, and a bunch of the kids died. So at 11 years old, he ran away from that orphanage. He knew he had a sister that lived right here in Pueblo. And so he somehow, some way, made it all the way here. And he found his sister who'd been recently married, and she told him everything that had happened to him. Then her husband said, "You know what, kid, we just don't need another mouth to feed, and you need to go." And it was in 1919, right in the middle of the Spanish flu pandemic. So he didn't know what he was going to do. So he started walking down the road, and some guy picked him up in a covered wagon and took him up to Rye, Colorado, up there, and raised him.
Wow.
So then when he went and fought, and he was in his 30s, he fought in World War II, won the Bronze Star, got out, came over and got a job as a manager of a restaurant down here on Union Street, and a beautiful woman comes walking there, and he falls in love with her, and he ends up marrying her. And just a few months later, they said, he said, she told him, says, you know what, George? She says, I haven't told you everything about me. She said, I have two daughters in an orphanage. And George was just devastated. He's like, why didn't you tell me about this? And she just didn't really have an answer. So anyway, so they both went over to the orphanage, and they talked with the girls, and they talked with the staff, and they brought the girls home. And the oldest one was my mother.
Wow.
Yeah. She was 11 years old, the same age George was when the guy took him in. So, and he raised her. And just a few months later, my mom told me that her mother was just was a drug addict and alcoholic, and she was just a horrible mother. And one day she comes into the house just in a drunken stupor, and she just starts screaming at all of them and says, I'm going to take your girls back to the orphanage, and there ain't a damn thing you could do about it. I remember Mom telling me with tears in her eyes, she says, man, I was just devastated. Said my mother had broken my heart so many times. So George did the only thing he knew to do. He went and hired a lawyer, and took him to court, and the judge sat down with my mother and says, it's like, what do you girls want to do? Mom said, man, we love George. He's like a father to us. And he said he wants to adopt us. And they said, all right, let me see what I can do. And he went over and talked to her mother, and he says, ma'am, you've been in my court rooms many, many times, the judge said, and I know your history all too well. He said, you've never been able to take care of these girls, and I just think it would be best if you would just allow George to adopt them and to take full custody of them. So she did.
Wow.
Praise God.
Wow.
I just thank God for people who love their neighbor like they do themselves.
Yeah.
So when we see these children in foster care, we need to remember, just in the state of Colorado alone, well over 3,000 children enter into the foster care system every single year. So there is a great opportunity for the children of God to rise up and say, you know what, I can make a difference.
Yeah.
It's difficult, it's hard, and it's not for the faint of heart. But it's worth it in the end. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Amen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that's. Let's move it right up here.
Wow, that's tough. I don't know that I can. You should write the book. Write the book. I spent a number of years as a single parent, and then I married the love of my life, and then God took him home 9 years ago, and now I am a grandmother. My 2 sons finally reproduced, married wonderful women, and it turns out that those chambers in your heart that are reserved for little kids just explode when you're a grandmother. And I don't know that I could be a foster parent, but I could be a foster grandmother. Is there a place for foster grandmothers that can hold and love and feed and spoil and go to Chick-fil-A? And I mean, is there a place for grandmothers to be a grandmother in this system?
So if in answering this, if you could also explain, one of you at some point, respite, those different options that they have, but if you want to say something first.
I would say definitely. And you could decide what that looks like. In personal experience, it's different for every family, I will say this. But in our family and with the kids we have taken in, it's been easiest for us to not seclude the foster child. And like, if you were to be the grandmother to the foster child, it would be, like for us, not for everybody, it would be easiest for you to say, I'll take out, 2 of them or 3 of them or whatever. That way it's not just taking the foster child, but that's different when the foster child doesn't have other siblings. But yeah, for sure, there's definitely a place in many ways for that.
What would one have to do to qualify for that? I mean, you'd have to go through the whole screening process anyway, right?
So there's different levels to,
Yes, so there are different levels. Before I get into that, I want you to look into CASA. It's a court-appointed special advocate. Essentially, you can take whatever range of ages of kiddos, you can take sibling groups, but you are their voice in court on top of being able to love them and spoil them and be grandma to them. So that's a fantastic program here in Colorado. It's all across the state. So definitely look into that. As far as the levels of, so it kind of gets a little complicated, but essentially there are respite providers, which is just short-term. Typically through the county, I believe it's just a 7-day bed, but I know through CPAs it might be shorter than that. So you would be able to take in kiddos as a respite provider, and that would be going through the certification process of being a foster parent. Sometimes those are kiddos that are like blowing out of foster homes, or those kids that are just kind of awaiting placement if there's a foster home that has some openings that is a foster to adopt placement, but the kid has to be removed right away. So respite can work a couple different ways. Or you can just make connections with a foster family here in the community, and they can be, they can essentially have you down as like a alternative caretaker. So that would just encompass background checks.
and what does that allow you to do?
If you're fully cleared, at least from the county standpoint, you would be able to have them like overnights as long as.
I'm a financial advisor. I've been fingerprinted. They told me when I became a financial advisor, you can never rob a bank. So my background is clear.
Yep.
One thing is, like, if you were just to say, I want to take them out for lunch, you don't have to have a background check if it's like your friend that's a foster parent in the church, or, yeah, it's just kind of what you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, and it definitely depends on the agency too. CPAs and the county have it's a little bit different. Through the county, we usually like to be a little bit more thorough. Depending on the length of time that you'll have the children or the child with you, depends on if background checks need to be done. Typically, we will err on the side of caution and say, we'll just do a quick background check and go from there. So, yeah.
All right. Chris, you had a question over here?
Hello. How long is the home study good for? Is that something? Go ahead.
So with the home study, once your home study is completed, you have like things that you'd have to do on an annual basis, and as long as you're keeping those up to date, it is good for as long as you keep doing those things.
Yeah, you have like a certain amount of hours of classes you have to do every year, and you can do them a little at a time throughout the year. We've had in the last 3 years like 5 certifications just because of how many times we've moved, but you get a new one every year.
Okay.
And then if you move, you update it based on the new location, and then are there like annual home inspections? Is that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, like an annual home inspection. Just when I say keep up with things, it's things like keeping like the training hours like Kayla was talking about. And then you're submitting your financial information, you keep us up to date on your vehicle's registration and insurance, you keep up to date on health exams for your whole household. So those are things that are like kind of recurring things as long as your license is active. And like we have had families that when they say, okay, we're finished, like they just let us know and we close them. And then if they would ever want to reopen, it means you go through the whole process again. So what we usually tell families is if you're not quite finished fostering, just let us know that we won't even call you for placements, but just keep up with everything, because going through the whole process again feels like it's just more work than just keeping up with those annual things.
And someone could go through the process even if they don't want to foster right then, but will one day, and they want to be prepared for whenever that is, as long as they keep up to speed on
Correct.
hours.
Yeah. I think for a general, or at least for our agency, is we like to know what the family is interested, what's the age group that they're looking to foster. And then I always say, well, we'll try to honor that, but we'll probably call you with other things too. And then we've had families that are just going through seasons of time when they're like, we're not interested in fostering right now. And so then we just kind of take them off our list of a family to call if we get a referral from the county. We try to work really much, just honor our families, like the seasons that families go through. It's not like if you're certified, like you have to be ready for every single call. Like we get it, families go through different seasons.
All right, so on that note, it's kind of been talked about a little bit, but just to clarify, you are allowed to pick to some extent what type of kids, gender, age, those types of things that you're willing to take?
Yeah, essentially you can say yes or no. We usually try to provide as much information as possible to the home coordinator to pass along to the family, like medical stuff, what school the kids go to, all sorts of stuff. So yeah, the family essentially does have the final say.
Okay. All right.
Do you have more questions?
Do you have another one? You can go through as many as you want.
Okay.
I mean, to an extent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where do the requests come from on the care portal? Was that from just the foster families?
So it comes directly from DHS caseworkers here in Pueblo. So they'll put in the request for the families that they're working with specifically. It will just be a little synopsis of what the family needs and why they need it. There's no identifying information or anything like that. But yeah, it comes directly from our office, and then it goes out to the response team, whoever wants to sign up under their agency. So whoever wants to sign up under Family Worship Center, it would go out to them.
And that includes, like, it can be for foster families or biological families
Correct.
that they're working with.
Yep, so any child that's currently working with DHS Child Welfare, so that could even be a family who they're all together, the children are still residing in the home. It could be a family like that.
But these would have to be families, in a sense, that are vetted through DHS.
Yes.
It's not just anybody jump on and say you want something. The
Yep.
caseworker would have to deem it a reasonable
Yes.
request. Okay.
Yep, that's correct.
All right.
And then with regards to timelines, is there, do they tell you you're going to have this child for X number of days, weeks, or how does that work?
We were told we'd have Michael till October. Yeah. And he's somewhere around here. Anyways, one of you can...
Usually, it's either are you willing to adopt or no, is usually the question DHS is asking our families, especially with our babies. Obviously, we want them in a long-term placement as soon as possible. So if the case goes in the direction of parental rights being terminated in adoption, that baby is bonding and attaching to the current placement. Usually we don't really have an answer as to timeframes, just because the case can change minute by minute, honestly.
And while it's not something you're looking for, theoretically, a foster parent can warn you that the time they can have the child is
Yep.
expiring.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're only able to have the kiddo up until September because you're going on vacation or going out of the country or moving or whatever, that is totally doable too.
And there are occasions where a child does just need like short term, but sometimes short term can lead to long term. But where up front, it's like, oh, maybe there's a family member who can eventually take, yeah. So it varies.
And just something, go ahead.
And one thing with DHS too is we're constantly looking for family. I think that's very important to keep in the mind. Our number one goal is for reunification with the family and to keep them with that bio as much as we can. Does that always happen? No. But I think sometimes when you do get into a situation, of course you're going to get connected to these kids and love them. And when it comes to that reunification process, that can be very hard and challenging, but it's just important to keep that in the back of your mind. You know, we are looking for that permanent home, whether it is with adoption or the biological family. So,
Yeah.
Okay. And then my last one is just like out of curiosity, what happens to the kids that, like, let's say there's, I guess what happens to the kids that don't have a foster home? Like, where do they stay?
Unfortunately, there are instances where kids are staying at our office with staff around the clock. We try to get them into making sure they're in school and in their therapeutic services, but essentially they're residing at our office. And I know this is a statewide issue. A lot of our big cities up north, even El Paso County, they're having kids stay at their office or having staff kind of hang out with them at like a hotel room where it's more home-based setting. So there are instances where that is occurring. Right now, we have 2 kiddos that are in that position through Pueblo County. But it sounds like there's quite a few youth that are in this position across the state.
And just to clarify, this is not like you have bedrooms at DHS for the kids who don't have homes. This would be staying literally in an office, which is what you said earlier. This would be staying in an office. You don't have bedrooms at DHS.
Oh, no.
we've turned
Yeah.
conference
Yeah,
rooms into
essentially, we're
bedrooms.
turning conference rooms into little bedrooms.
Yeah.
And so it just gets complicated with ages and genders and, yeah, but we're doing the best that we can.
And it's fair to say most of the time that's older kids.
The youngest kid that we've had is a 7-year-old female, and then at the same time, we had like a 15-year-old male, so she was our youngest, so
Okay.
hopefully it doesn't get any younger than that.
So
but-
typically families are far more willing to take babies than
Yeah,
adults. Okay.
yep.
All right. Other questions out here before I go to a different list? Anybody here? All right. I think just 2 that I want to get answers to. First, I mean, as Christians, what are, if there are any, limitations to sharing your faith with the child? What does that look like in foster care? Obviously, you know, a baby is probably a little bit different. If you pray with the baby, I don't think the baby can go tell anyone anyways. But, you know, at least with an elementary age kid, with teens, are there any guidelines on what you're allowed to do as foster parents?
Not through our agency. Essentially, when you take a kid in, you're immersing them into your lifestyle, your activities. If you go to church every Sunday, usually they will come right along with you. Of course, if they refuse and don't want to go, that's always a struggle. But essentially, even like vacations, there are authorizations that can be made where the kid can go and travel with you. So essentially, you just take them in as your own, and they will have a say on whether they want to do things, of course. But there's no limitations as to like religion or what they can and can't do. They may come with their own culture and their own religion that we try to have foster parents be respectful of, and try to familiarize them with their culture or that specific religion the kiddo comes along with. But for the most part, like if I took one in, obviously I would try to get them to come to church with me every Sunday. So just take them in as your own.
Okay. Kayla?
I don't have a ton of experience, but I would say this demographic is not one that is highly immersed in any religion, I would say. But we had to go through training that basically said, if any family member doesn't want them to go to church, you can't take them to church. If they are...
But the parents don't want you to...
Yeah, if the parents don't want you to take them to church, you can't take them to church. If the parents want them to go to a mosque, you have to take them to a mosque. And that's where you have to be able, at the beginning, to say yes or no to this child, what I'm going to be willing to, what I'm comfortable with. Is that fair to say?
Does anybody
Yeah,
else
so-
want to jump in? Go.
It gets a little tricky because biological parents do still have parental rights, so they are privy to like still medical records, educational records, any sort of religious, cultural thing that they want their kiddo to still be involved in. We focus a lot on, it's called ICWA, it's Indian Child Welfare Act, so if any kiddo in the state of Colorado has any affiliation or eligibility for enrollment in a Native American tribe, we have to respect that, and we have to actually send notice to the tribes that are here in Colorado. So we do try to focus on the kids' culture and making sure that we're respectful of that.
And I think it might be a different topic altogether when we're talking religion versus culture. So as, you know, a Christian foster parent, I think it'd be really easy and maybe even fun and interesting to learn and engage the culture more so than trying to engage the religion side of things. So, but both are part of, or potentially part of, what that looks like. Is becoming a foster family expensive, and what kind of aid is there with expenses that you get from adding someone to your house? Yeah.
So with New Horizons, like when you become a foster parent with us, and I think this is probably true even with like, oh yeah, one of you guys talked to it as far as on the county side, but like we cover the expenses to become a foster family. So there's cost that goes with background checks, there can some, and like health exams and things like that, but we try to cover everything as much as possible. And then as far as when a child is placed in the home, there is a monetary reimbursement that comes with them being in your home. And then additionally, I would say at least for New Horizons on our part, we try to support as much as possible, whatever that may look like, is so that it's not a financial burden on the family. I will add to that, obviously, like if a family is, one of the parts that happens when you're doing like the home study process is we look at your finances. And so if there is financial issues already in your home, we would probably have some really hard conversations about, is this the place to step into bringing a child into your home? Because we cannot negate all the expenses that happen with bringing a child into your home, but we do try to provide as much support as we can on the financial side of things.
Okay.
The financial side, they give you money to take care of that child. They do not, this is not a job, so you can't come into this with the expectation of, I will have this income. It's not that. It is, they give you money to provide for that child.
Yeah. Do you guys want to add anything?
I don't know the exact details on if it costs anything to be a foster parent through the county. I want to say it's very minimal, if anything. But kind of along the lines as what they were saying is this is not a job where you can't benefit financially off of being a foster parent, so this can't be your primary source of income. So you have to show that you can sustain before becoming a foster parent.
Yeah, I think especially with the whole idea of permanency and looking for a place for the kid in the long run, once you're no longer fostering, that type of reimbursement and payment goes away, and so you have to already be a household that could care for the kid. I will say, I mean, we've done obviously private placement and support from private placements, and then it's not Pueblo but Fremont County placement. And I wouldn't go into it thinking this is going to be a huge financial burden. I think that's well alleviated along the way, and you get support. But in the long run, you have to be able to provide for the child if you're a permanent setting without any aid from the county or an agency.
Along with that, they are under government insurance, Medicaid, so that you don't have to pay for any of their medical stuff. They can get on WIC to help with food. So there are things, those things also help keep them paid for while they're in the system.
All right, do we have any more questions in the room? Just want to make sure I don't leave anyone hanging. So let's go down the line for the final thought. What, for people here, people online, what do you hope they do from here? what are your final thoughts? I can start on this side if you'd like this time, unless you'd like to begin again.
I
All
just
right,
think
Stacy.
not being afraid and just doing what you can do, like Kayla said. What has God put on your heart? What is your ability to help? And whether that's praying or you do become a foster parent, just whatever you're capable of, and not being afraid and just loving these kids and these families, and even the bio families providing that support. So.
Okay.
Same answer, just being there to support them, however that looks, however God is leading you to support that family and that child. Kind of like what I mentioned, CASA, that's a huge way just to kind of get your feet wet on what the system looks like, what type of kiddos are involved in foster care or any sort of out-of-home placement. That's a phenomenal program. But I think if there's a way for like Family Worship Center to, I know confidentiality has to be respected, but if there's a way for us to see what kiddos that are involved in this congregation are in out-of-home placement and just providing direct support to them too, I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, the first thought that came to my mind is just pray and seek the Lord on how He wants you to get involved, whatever that looks like, and then being faithful to walk in whatever He tells you.
I feel like they've covered it all really well. And I would just like to, I really want to chime in on the CASA thing, because I love the thought of, like, if it looks too huge to bring, like, kids into your home, but you want to get involved, CASA is a great place to start. It is, yeah, some of the best support that some of my families have had is some of their CASA workers, and so definitely check into that. And then I just want to kind of just put a plug in that foster care is about, it's ministering to those who are in really tough situations, and it can be a way to grow a family, it can lead to adoption, but I think when I see foster families go into it with the heart to minister to the biological family, the family that these children have come from, like actually expanding their own family by bringing in another family, by the biological family that is connected to the child that's now in their home, I see that as some of the richest experiences. Yes, there are cases where it leads to adoption, and that happens and is necessary. And there's a powerful piece of foster care when you're actually rooting for and cheering on the biological family that they can actually make this happen to get their kids back into their care. And then walking alongside them when that happens, I feel like that's an extension of the church as well. And I think that's a piece that gets me really excited when I see families do that well. So just recognizing that foster care is so much more than just bringing kids into your home. You're actually expanding your home, the borders of your home to include many others, and there is beauty in that as well. So yeah, getting involved in whatever way possible.
I would say make a decision and take practical steps to live out that decision, whether it's I will do something right now or I will do something in 5 years. Decide what that's going to look like and actually do it. Because it's easy to get excited about something for a little while and then it just kind of fades off. I mean, it happens to everybody, but it's a blessing, it's hard, and it's worth it. I mean, I would say in this church, or if you're watching online and you're from a different church, find a family in your church. Does not have to be us. But making that relationship, I think it goes beyond just filling the need is wonderful, and I don't want to undermine that at all. But having a relationship built and a support system, like I can count on this person on a monthly basis to bring me a meal or a daily basis to pray for me, whatever that looks like. Having that connection in the church body is really beneficial.
Yeah, so just to end, I think, when we look at this broad topic in our culture of pro-life, and one of the objections that I hear a lot to kind of the fight against abortion, they have this new saying. They say, you're forced birthers. You don't care about the child afterwards. All you want is for the child to be born, and then your fight's over. And while I don't think that actually represents the church well, they are correct that our mission in this idea of being pro-life goes beyond just the womb. And I think what I'd like to see in the future, I want to do a practical pro-life conference, and this would be one element of it, because I think foster care is a very practical way that you can be pro-life, and that you can step in, and that you can care for these kids, and that you can meet the needs of these people. And so look at this not as, this broken, complicated foster system over here. See this as part of the larger movement that's happening, that we believe people are created in the image of God. They are deserving and they are worthy of our care and our love. These children deserve someone to love them and to care for them. And so see it in that light, that this is part of a larger battle that's being fought in our culture for the sanctity of life, not just in the womb, but outside the womb. And I think when I began to frame it that way, it became even more important that this is part of this large fight, that life is valuable, that life is worth not only protecting legally, but then caring about in reality when that child is born. And often born into a family that is unable to care for them, often, in a family and in the middle of their elementary years, the family is no longer able to care for them, at least for a time. And so I think I would frame it that way and see how can you be involved and where can you go from here. So I do want to have a practically pro-life conference. I think that would be fun. I think that would be a good way to try to wrap the topic as part of this larger push to understand and respect the sanctity of life. But for now, thank you for those especially who came in person and were here with us. And then also thank you to all you people online for watching from the comfort of your home. Thank you to our panel for being here tonight. A good source of knowledge here. And so if you have any questions, I'm sure they'd be happy to chat still. If you didn't want to ask publicly, but you have a question, I'm sure they're willing to hang out till about 10 or 11. The kids pastor thinks the lady in the white shirt with the glasses is hot. Wrong one, Chad. Anyways, for those who are really confused, Stacy is married to Andrew, who's the young adults pastor. And then Morgan is married to Mike, who's the kids pastor. And then Kayla's married to me. And so we're trying to put something on the screen, but that's okay, Chad. Just make sure that's not on the video. Don't zoom out that much. We don't want that to go online with us. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, ladies, for being here tonight and for answering questions and engaging on